Hello, BookTube. I went to the Brattle Bookshop today. I have waited a very long time to say that again. For those of you, there are a couple of thousand of you who are new to this channel, may not have delved into 80 million back videos. The Brattle is a used bookstore here in Boston that I used to go to on a regular basis. I've been a loyal customer there for well over 5 years. They are 3 stories of used books. The first 2 are just in, what you would consider an ordinary used bookstore. Used books, various sizes and shapes on every subject under the sun. The third story is antique and collectible books that are pricier, can be very pricey. And it's great. The stock turns over all the time. The first thing you see when you walk in the front door under normal circumstances is a big buying table. And the Brattle is out buying all the time. So the stock changes all the time. And that would be great enough to make it a worthy place to go on a regular basis. But the Brattle also owns the lot next door to their building. And they fill it every day with bargain carts. With bargain carts. Under normal circumstances, those carts are $1, $3, and $5 carts. And the books are not organized in any way. They're every type of shape and description, size, and it's wonderful. Absolutely wonderful. I love the Brattle shop, but I am a creature of the Brattle sale lot. And of course, when the pandemic struck in America, that all stopped. The governor of Massachusetts declared bookstores, of course, to be non-essential places of business, and they closed. And Massachusetts has had a rough time of it with this pandemic. We've posted some pretty awful numbers, but those numbers have been steadily declining. And recently, today, the governor of Massachusetts announced phase 2 of reopening the state, which means that businesses can reopen with an extremely heightened awareness of pandemic protocols. And the Brattle did. The Brattle has done the same thing. They've started by opening their outdoor sale lot, which by its very nature is slightly less concerning for the pandemic, because you're outside. You can easily distance from other people. You just have to worry about cleaning your hands. That's all, because you're handling all of these old books. But I debated whether or not I would go. I thought I've grown quite accustomed to being local, to being extremely local. But in the end, I couldn't resist because I am a creature of the Brattle. So I went to the Brattle Bookshop. And I browsed, and it was wonderful. I hadn't realized until that moment how badly I had missed that procedure, the procedure of just browsing randomly for book discoveries. The longing to do that was increased yesterday when I watched videos from both Mark Richardson and Jason at Byways in Bookland, where they both did the same thing. They went book shopping for the first time in what feels like forever. And now I have joined them. I have done the same. And I brought back a bag load of books, and I want to show them to you, because it was a joy to just browse and shop. The inside shop of the Brattle is still closed to customer traffic. They're going to slowly ease that back open. It's going to be a little bit harder to manage that. You know, it's a used bookstore, so it's cramped alleyways and cramped aisles and whatnot. So it's going to be a little harder to manage that, but the sale lot was open. And I got to go and just enjoy myself. So I want to show you, I think it's 9 books, and I want to show you what they are. They range all over the map. The first one is an old Modern Library Giant edition from the 1940s. It's seen better days. This will be a Brattle. Oftentimes I will get a book of the Brattle that I need to reinforce. This is definitely one of them. This is an anthology edited by Ellery Queen, 100 Years Entertainment. The Great Detective Stories from 1841 to 1941, which is when this book came out. And this is a gigantic collection of short stories. You can see it's in rough shape. It'll look beautiful by the time I'm done with it, and it will be indestructible. But I want to keep the cover. I like the cover because this is the note is tagged to the bookcase, and it's got a little blood stain on it and whatnot. And this is Ellery Queen just going through all the different categories of detective short stories, and stories focusing on crooks, stories focusing for humor, stories focusing on great detectives, stories focusing on locked rooms, and chooses of just a vast variety. Everybody from Lord Dunsany to Ellery Queen himself is in here, with only one really notable exception, and that is Sherlock Holmes. There's no Sherlock Holmes story in this book. The other exceptions are famous detectives who never actually starred in short stories, like Charlie Chan, or Perry Mason, or Philo Vance. So they aren't in here because they aren't represented in short stories. But everybody else is in here, and I remember vaguely this book. I've never actually read my way through it, but I'm going to reinforce the dust jacket and read my way through it soon, probably this week. Then the next one is a buy. One of the things I love about the Brattle sale lot is that it will give you second chances at all kinds of things. The Brattle's out constantly buying. I don't want you to get the wrong impression. You'll see in the course of this mail haul, those of you who haven't seen a Brattle mail haul before, they don't just put junk out there. A lot of used bookstores, when they have an outside barrow or two, they will put junk out there, stuff that looks like this, stuff that looks like it's falling apart. This is not actually falling apart. It's just a dust jacket that needs some tender loving care. The book itself is rock solid. The Brattle doesn't do that. The mixture out on the sale lot is new and old, perfect condition and dodgy condition. And one of the things I love about it is that since they're always buying, you never know what you're going to see out there from week to week. And that means that you might see something that you don't have that you wish you did. In my case, something that I had that I got rid of, or something I have but that's not in quite the shape that I would like it, or the edition that I would like it. The Brattle has such a high turnover that you can actually be choosy about such things and realistically hope that in your lifetime you will see them supplied. Now, right now, the outside sale lot for the Brattle is all $5. Everything is $5. No $1 or $3 cards, but $5 is still a cheap price for a brand new book. And that's what I got this next one. This is the Oxford Book of English Verse, the Helen Gardner edition. And I have this, but I have it with no dust jacket. This lovely dust jacket is... I have always told myself, I have the Oxford Book of English Verse right here in this room. I've always told myself, well, I love it, and I pull it down off the shelf and I consult it a lot. But what I ideally want is a hardcover with a dust jacket of the Helen Gardner edition, where she pays due lip service to the Quiller Couch edition, the original one that he did at the turn of the 20th century, and then the one that he did a little later. But she makes no bones about the fact that a lot of the selections for Quiller Couch are unsatisfying, to use her very British term. And as she states in this book, this is not an update of the Quiller Couch Oxford Book of English Verse. This is a new anthology, and I think it's brilliant. It still goes under the heading of the Oxford Book of English Verse, which is considered just sort of amorphously as one of the great anthologies of all time, but it's a totally different book, and I love it, absolutely love it. I love it more than the Quiller Couch version, and I love it more than the versions that come after. The Gardner edition is my favorite. And now I have it. I have a copy on the shelf, but now I have the one that I want, the exact thing that I want, which is a luxury of the Brattle's buying, that I can do that. Then his next one is an author that I love, and this is a book of his that I read when it came out, but I don't own a copy, didn't own a copy, and the author is Nigel Hamilton, who was briefly infamous for his book JFK Reckless Youth, where he wrote a scabrous, warts, zits and all, chronicle of young John F. Kennedy, that was violently disavowed by the Kennedy family, and that is what is now known as the Streisand effect. You don't want to do that. You'll only make the book more popular. That was going to be the first volume in a projected trilogy, but it never happened, and Nigel Hamilton went on to write a trilogy about Franklin Delano Roosevelt during World War II that was magnificently good. It's just amazing. This is such a readable author. He's written a lot of other books that I really like, and he took that same JFK Reckless Youth approach with Bill Clinton and wrote a book about the formation of his character. Now, I don't believe that Bill Clinton has much of a character, so I wasn't particularly interested in that book. I read it because of its author, but I don't really care about Hope, Arkansas, and any of those tired old campaign trail saws about his hardscrabble upbringing. But there was a second book. There was a second Clinton book, and that's this, Mastering the Presidency. Nice, big work on the presidency of Bill Clinton. Which, nevertheless, I read this when it came out, and I was impressed by how much of Bill Clinton's non-presidential biography this book works in. But even so, it concentrates on Clinton's time in office and does a better job, I think, certainly a more readable job than any other version. I'm very happy to have it. It'll just go on, once I reread it, it'll go on the biography shelf right with the American President's books, because this is the one I want. This and Clinton's own book, his amazing, truly remarkable presidential or autobiography, My Life. You really can't do without that. But I'm happy to have that as an ebook rather than a printed book. Then this next one is an anthology, and it was the first thing I spotted on the carts, and I grabbed it right away. This is the Book Lover's Almanac, in which the editor, Robert Britton, goes through the calendar day by day and gives you on each day something of literary or quasi-literary historical significance, and then the appropriate quotes, whether it's an excerpt from the diaries of John Evelyn or the speeches of Winston Churchill or whatever it is. And I have never read this, so it's going to be great fun. It's not the sort of thing I think that I will read from start to finish. I think I'll just more dip into it. Of course, on the subway ride back here to Hyde Cottage from the Brattle, I checked today's date in here. And I think that's probably what I'll do quite often with this thing. But it's the sort of thing that is just endlessly enjoyable to have, so I grabbed it. I don't think I got any paperbacks today. I just think I got all hardcovers. I'm not sure that I saw any paperbacks. But this next one is old. I don't believe that this edition actually has a date on it, but this is at least 100 years old, if not more. And I have had editions of this before, but I grabbed this one because I know that I don't have one now. This is Wood's Natural History, which was a long series. It all looked like this in this uniform edition. There were many volumes. But this is on mammalia. This is on animals. And I had it when I was a wee snippet. It's full of... Oh, God, I had to turn to the domestic cat. It has non-satanic animals, too. Let's see if we can find one of those. There is a stoat. It has all these little black and white illustrations. There's a seal. And it's... I love this sort of thing because it's natural history, but it's badly outdated. So it's going to be describing a world of mammalia that is radically different from what we have today. We don't have... When this book was being compiled, herds of African elephant, 200 strong, were a common sight. Bands of African Cape hunting dogs, 200 strong, were a common sight. When this book was compiled, there was no such thing as environmental degradation. In other words, this is going to be a lot of fun. It's eloquent too. It's eloquently written because it's basically an Edwardian production. But it's going to be fun to watch also for the changes. And again, this is like the Book Lover's Almanac in that I will not just sit and read this. Instead, I will keep it on the shelf and consult it when various animals come up. if that makes any sense. Like, for instance, was supposed to be out already. There's a book that's coming out. I don't know if it'll still be 2020. It might be 2021. A big natural history on hippos, on the various species of hippo in the world, and their natural history, their behavior, and whatnot. And I think if my information is correct, it's going to be a fairly big book. And one of the first things I'm going to want to do is read up on the natural history of hippos that I have here at Hyde Cottage, including older natural histories. I'll be interested to see what Wood's Natural History has to say about hippos. So it's extremely nerdy. I nerded out at the Brattle today. I'm sorry about that. This next one is a specialty study of William Hazlitt, who wore every literary hat in the world in his own day, but is largely remembered now as an essayist and critic. And this is a study of him as a critic, The Mind of a Critic by David Bromwich. Fairly specialized, even more so than the Clinton book, because this is not going to talk much about any aspect of Hazlitt's life other than his critical essays and maybe his critical development as a writer. It's extremely specialized. I acknowledge that. I got it for $5. So I will read it if it's too specialized or if it's too boring. I've never read this book before. If it's too specialized or too dry, I will just return it to the Brattle for credit. I will mulch it under and give that credit to some other experiment. It's a nice thing about the Brattle. One of the many nice things about the shop is that the prices are so low, even inside the shop, but especially in the bargain section, that you can take gambles like this. You can just risk. You'll be out $5. Maybe I'm out $5 for something that's going to be boring. I don't think that I'll find it completely boring because I find Hazlitt fascinating, and I have a bookshelf for collections by critics new and old, of prefaces, books on books, collected reviews, and Hazlitt is featured many times on those bookshelves. So if this is good, it will go up there. Of course, the goal at the Brattle is to get books that will end up in this room. I don't know how true that is of many of the things here today, but the Oxford Book of English Verse will certainly do it. Maybe this one will too, or the Wood's Natural History. The next one is something that again I've read it and I love it. I love this author, but I think this is a UK edition. I don't remember the American edition looking like this. This is by Charles Nicholl, the author of a great book on Christopher Marlowe called The Reckoning. Of course, it's called The Reckoning because it's about Marlowe. But in his case, I would allow the title because The Reckoning by Charles Nicholl is about the death of Christopher Marlowe. It's about what actually happened in that room in Deptford and all the things that led up to it. Unbelievably good. The way this author goes after historical records is amazing. The tenaciousness with which, and the insight with which he does it to just create a picture where there was none before, or where there was an accepted picture that his research proves was probably wrong. And this is the same thing. This is about Shakespeare. This is The Lodger, about the time that Shakespeare spent in 1604 and one particular place in London. We know this because 8 years later he had to give testimony at the Court of Appeals, I think it was, or the Court of Requests? Court of Requests. He had to have testimony at the Court of Requests. It's the only instance, as Nicholl points out, it's the only instance in which we have a recording of something that Shakespeare actually said. And that deposition looks back to his time as a lodger in someone else's home, and to the works that he was writing there, including King Lear. This is as you'd expect from this author. This is one of the books, a Shakespeare book that you actually want to have. I know there are a million of them, a sea of them. But in terms of biographical studies, those Shakespeare books are usually wretched because we don't have much to go on. This is an exception. This is a Shakespeare book that you absolutely have to have. And on top of that, Nicholl's a fantastic writer. Oh my, he's a fantastic writer. You should read this book, and you should definitely read The Reckoning. Definitely. I didn't see that today, but I already have a copy. I'm not sure that even in my geeky excess I would have bought a second copy today. Then the next book is a big fat biography, which I read and liked when it first came out. When was this? 2009. So before we knew each other. This is by Hannah Pakula, and it's about Madame Chiang Kai-shek. This is The Last Empress. Nice, big, fat biography of the making of modern China. It's about Madame Chiang Kai-shek, but it's also about the world, the international political situation at the time. I read this when it first came out and loved it. And about a year ago, I saw a trade paperback of this at the Brattle. And I was tempted, and I don't know why I didn't get it then, but I didn't. And it was gone the next time I went, because that's another thing that goes hand in hand with the Brattle's heavy turnover of stock, is that it's looked over by bookish people on a regular basis. So don't sleep. Should you ever be lucky enough to go to the Brattle, don't sleep on your choices. If you're out in the sale lot, especially if the sale lot goes back to normal and you're holding a $1 book in your hand, don't hesitate, because it might not be there when you go back. I'm happy to have the hardcover. The hardcover is actually better because it will stand a rereading better. I want to reread this, goaded not only by the fact that I left that trade paperback behind, but also by the fact that I've seen it on the bookshelves of some booktubers, which gives me bookish FOMO, fear of missing out. It makes I study. I'm not alone in this, so I'm not going to feel guilty. I study your bookshelves all the time when I'm watching your videos, and some of the books on those bookshelves call out to me. They taunt me because they represent bad mistakes on my part, books that I gave up that I don't want to give up. And I've seen this book on a couple of shelves, so I'm very glad to have it again. And that isn't the only place where BookTube entered my Brattle shopping. The last book that I want to show you is explicitly an answer to BookTube, because Jason Harrigan at Byways in Bookland has recently begun once again threatening us all with an exhaustive read-along of Foucault's Pendulum by Umberto Eco. Foucault's Pendulum is his favorite book, and he knows every single burp and wrinkle of this thing. He knows the scriptural, canonical, testamental. It's just unbelievable how the detail. It's an odd thing. It's something that is worth a discussion on its own. How many of us not only have a favorite book, but are an expert on that book? it doesn't go hand in hand. It doesn't need to happen. You can have a favorite book and not know every single thing about it the way Jason does about this book. And I wonder how many people. I wonder how many people it would be true for. I had that question when I was watching him revive the frankly horrifying subject of the possibility of him taking us through this page by page for 50 years. I will do it. I will absolutely do it. A learning opportunity like that doesn't come along very often for free. It's still horrifying. But when I heard him raise that subject again, I had the question in my mind. Well, it's interesting. He is probably one of the world's foremost experts on his favorite book. That's how much he loves it. He's dug into it. He hasn't just enjoyed it. It's perfectly okay to do. Plenty of people, I imagine most people, merely enjoy their favorite book. They haven't become an expert on it in any way. He has. And that made me think, how many other people is that true for? And how many people on BookTube is it true for? And of course I thought about myself, and I realized right away, okay, at first I thought, well, wouldn't that take the joy out of it being your favorite book if you become an expert on everything about it? Its criticism, its reception, its backbone, its scaffolding, its DNA. Wouldn't that take the fun out of it being your favorite book? And then I immediately realized, no. I have read and researched exhaustively on my favorite book. I could threaten a 50-year read-along of the same thing, the same way, and I love it still. So, when Jason threatened or offered his read-along the first time, months and months and months ago, I was going to the Brattle regularly and spotted a UK trade paperback of this book. I didn't have one at the time at all, and I thought, oh, well, you're going to want that if you're going to reread it. If he does a read-along, you're going to want to reread it. You're never going to get a chance like that again, somebody who knows the book backwards and forwards. But then he had other plans, and that got tabled, and in the meantime, someone wanted that UK trade paperback, so I boxed it up and sent it to them. And I didn't have a copy, and I thought, well, I could get a digital copy. But then I was at the Brattle and I saw this. It's just a brand new copy of the American hardcover of Foucault's Pendulum for a song for $5. So I grabbed it. I grabbed it. Not only because I have been tempted to reread this thing many times. Many times. It's a deliberately complicated and intimidating work. That always intrigues. But the idea of there being a read-along, I will now hold on to this copy. And that was my trip to the Brattle. And it was a blast. A blast. I got Foucault's Pendulum. I got The Last Empress. The Lodger in a UK hardcover. Hazlitt, The Mind of a Critic, just the study of his criticism. Wood's Natural History, a great old 100-year-old reference work, used to be in every school. Then The Book Lover's Almanac. That was me today. Then Mastering the Presidency by Bill Clinton, or not by Bill Clinton, by Nigel Hamilton. The New Oxford Book of English Verse by Helen Gardner. And an Ellery Queen anthology, a great big Ellery Queen anthology that I don't want to put on this pile because it's very delicate. I'm gonna be very gentle with it until it is indestructible. The rest of these are in pretty much new condition. So that was my Brattle adventure today, and boy oh boy. It was long overdue. It was long overdue. I could have stayed longer. I had a blast. Just had a blast. So I might go back. If I do, you'll be the first to know. Thank you, BookTube.